Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to ASA Presents the American Staffing Association's weekly webinar series. My name is Monica Graziosi, ASA's Manager of Online Learning Programs. You're here today for the webinar, The Staffing Productivity Report, Benchmarks to Optimize Recruiter Performance in the Age of AI. Now, just a few housekeeping remarks. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a control panel. There you can turn closed captioning on and off. You'll also see that we are recording today's webinar. It will be available in the on-demand section of the ASA website within 2 business days for members to view. Also, in your control panel, you'll see the Q&A and chat features. The Q&A is the best place to submit any questions for our speakers today, and the chat panel is an excellent way to stay engaged with your fellow attendees. Please feel free to share your thoughts, any helpful links or resources, your LinkedIn profile account, or just say hello and where you're joining us from. Information for CE is here on your screen for both ASA and SHRM. ASA certified individuals who are joining us live today do not need to submit for CE credit. It will be applied automatically. Today's webinar is brought to you by Prodoscore, and I'd like to take a moment to extend our gratitude for making today's webinar possible. And now I am delighted to welcome our presenters, Noah Youssef, Adrian Reese, and Armando Porras. Welcome.
Thank you, Monica, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. It is my pleasure to be able to share with you our very first staffing productivity report. This is a product that has been the culmination of about a year-long collaboration between myself as well as Adrian Reese, the Vice President of Data Science at Prodoscore, as well as Armando Perez, Vice President of Sales at Prodoscore. When we came together about a year ago, our interest was on being able to harness Prodoscore's over 1.6 million data points on recruiter activity on a daily basis. At ASA, productivity is very important to us because we are very interested in understanding how staffing companies are making themselves more efficient to grow in a stagnant labor market. And Prodoscore has those insights within their data, having served the staffing industry for the last couple of years. And so therefore, what we have released and intend to keep doing so on a quarterly basis is our staffing productivity report, which is going to provide customized insights by size of staffing company as well as for the industry overall on how staffing companies are making themselves more efficient and how recruiters are using their time on a daily basis. Adrian and Armando, I'd like to invite you to share a little bit about Prodoscore as well as some of the data points underlying this report.
Thank you, Noah. Nice to see everybody today. Really excited to join in you, Noah, and Adrian on this exciting webinar. So yeah, really quickly about Prodoscore. We're an analytics platform with a heavy emphasis on the staffing industry. That's why we're very excited to be a corporate sponsor of ASA. And basically what we do is that we connect to all the different business systems that recruiters, salespeople, and other teams as well are using on their daily basis. So this includes ATS, CRM, their email and calendar systems, their phone systems, also virtual meeting systems like Zoom or Microsoft Teams. And we can also track the activity locally in the laptop of recruiters to get a good sense of their work patterns and also activity in other web applications like job boards and AI tools. And so we aggregate all of this information to provide insights on daily activity and behaviors of recruiters so that our customers can complement their traditional KPIs of placements and fill rates and so on with our data. Obviously, traditional KPIs are critical for the staffing industry. At the end of the day, this determines if you're successful as an organization and if your recruiters are being successful. But most of the times, they don't tell the complete picture. So customers, we work with them to then use our data so that if you have a subset of recruiters that maybe they're not hitting their KPIs consistently, or maybe you've invested in technology or process automation, and that's not generating the impact in your KPIs that you're expecting yet. Again, you can use Prodoscore dataset to analyze, well, is this a people issue? Is this a process issue? Are people not executing the process as we expect them to? And or a technology where it's not being adopted by certain groups, individuals, or desks as you expected. And then as you deploy initiatives to improve, you can also have a leading indicator so that on a daily basis, you can see the impact that your initiatives are having. And you don't need to wait months or quarters to make sure that that will have the impact on your KPIs that you expect. And so to help to do all of these analyses, one important part that we also do is generating industry benchmarks and trendings around the industry so that we're not just helping our customers analyze their internal data set, but also compare it to what the rest of the industry is doing and where, for example, work patterns of recruiters and salespeople are evolving over time, especially now with the use of AI and also learning how top performers, what are they doing on a daily basis that is helping them be successful in a market like the one that we're currently at. And so that's why we wanted to put this industry benchmark and trending analysis together with ASA that can provide firms some good insights to again assess then against their internal operations, how are they doing and how their work pattern of their workforce is evolving. Adrian, can you provide just a little bit more technical also on like the type of data and analysis that you did with your team and Noah's team?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as head of the data science team, a lot of those higher level insights are a lot of what my team handles. What I really love about working at Prodoscore is that we're able to see across multiple different organizations within one industry. So, for instance, this 1.6 million data points captured per month is just focused on recruiters in the staffing and recruiting industry. That's not also taking into account all the other industries that we look into as well. So for this sample in particular, we're looking at about 25 months worth of trends that we were able to assess. On top of that, we're looking at over 70 different companies and nearly 800 recruiters in this sample. So it's a pretty substantive sample for us to actually learn what are we seeing in the industry. And like Armando said, a huge benefit that we bring to our customers is the ability to know how other companies are also performing. So all that cross-organizational insight is all anonymized, but our customers find it invaluable to learn how they are comparing to others in the industry in like industries as well. Noah?
Thank you, Adrian and Armando. Sometimes having KPIs or a better sense of where the industry is a nice to have. Unfortunately, this is not one of those times. Whether it's your first time joining us on one of these research webinars, or even if you have been in the staffing industry for a while, you'll know that right now our industry has gone through quite a bit of a slump. And a lot of that has to do with just the state of the labor market overall. In this low hire and low fire environment, there are fewer clients looking to expand headcount, and there are also fewer job seekers that are looking to find their next opportunity. And it's in these moments that makes KPIs about your business and about the industry at large that much more essential to knowing where you can improve growth. And so these data points that are included within the staffing productivity report are really designed to be able to give staffing companies not only a better understanding about how their performance compares to their peers, but also where the industry stands at large. And what does that mean for the industry's future 3 months, 6 months, a year down the road? Right now, staffing companies are facing an immense amount of competition. They're facing competition from other staffing companies. They're facing competition from businesses that are looking to improve their human resources capabilities in-house. They're also, to Armando's point, facing competition from artificial intelligence and the possibilities that those tools have to being able to automate or augment workforce solutions processes. And so, therefore, staffing companies have an imperative to understanding what they need to do to ensure that they are growing at their maximum potential. And that is the point of why we have produced the staffing productivity report. Armando, Adrian, any thoughts about how staffing companies can use the insights from this report on a daily or a regular basis?
Yeah, I would just add, Noah, that obviously we're in exciting times and how fast things are changing. Definitely what was making firms successful 2, 3 years ago is not what going to be the playbook today. The market has changed significantly, but then also you have AI tools and efficiencies that you can gain, and that where we're starting to see really exciting impact of what that can have with your firms. So it's very important that you're always evolving that playbook, and again the focus and the activity and how your teams are executing to make sure that you are being able to be successful in any type of market. Adrian,
Yeah.
anything you would add?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it's a question of optimization. What we see in the data very regularly is that AI adoption has increased significantly. So, how a recruiter is managing the multiple tools that they're working with, how they're using AI to help automate existing tasks are definitely a lot of what we're looking to highlight. And I think the insights that we bring today will help set expectations on how you should expect your recruiters to show up day over day. Noah?
Thank you, Adrian and Armando. So, right now, we're going to highlight four key takeaways that you can get from our staffing productivity report. And we're going to dive into each one of them with the perspective of what this means for your business today. Starting with a point that actually Armando brought up earlier in our presentation, which is that recruiter activity is not just it doesn't just form the basis for KPIs for your company, but it also provides a sense of where the industry is going at large. You know, as an economist, I often hear members say, well, you know, my company is seeing more business, so maybe that means that the industry is finally poised for a rebound. Well, this is the exact sort of insights that we wanted to be able to glean from Prodoscore's data. And so what we found was that certain activities, such as calls made by recruiters, or more importantly, emails made by recruiters, they actually demonstrate some correlation to overall employment levels within the staffing industry. And the reason for that is that when recruiters are seeing more engagement, not only from clients, but from candidates, when there is a busier hiring cycle, that portends more churn within the labor market. And so what we see is that what we believe is that the recovery within the industry is going to be signaled by steps that or by activity amongst recruiters that you're seeing within your own backyard. Armando.
Yeah, and I'll let Adrian comment a little bit first about some of the data sets here, and then I'll add some color. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So similar to Armando, similar to what Noah said, it's really what we're noticing is that this activity isn't just a productivity metric, but it honestly is a leading indicator. What we tend to see is specifically when we're looking at outreach, so we're talking about calls and emails that are made, it's usually predicting outcomes about 90 days in advance. So that means that the activities that you're doing today are going to influence what your revenue looks like as a company about 3 months from now. And that tends to be quite systematic. We see it across most of the customers that we do perform our outcome studies with. So what I like to tell them is you can look at job board postings, or you can look at the PMI index to try to predict the future, or you can look at call logs. Specifically, when we're looking at our larger organizations, we saw a massive ramp up in calls, specifically pretty early in Q2 of 2025, but all other companies, we saw this uptick in Q4 of 2025. And essentially, what that is telling us is that possibly there's going to be a market recovery that's coming along. Our large organizations are hitting about 157 calls per week, in which is an all-time high from the 77 that we saw year over year. So what does that mean? We saw a 42% increase in call volume in our larger organizations. So that's definitely something to celebrate for sure, because we tend to see that initial call volume leading to the market performing well as well. But we did notice something in particular, specifically amongst our smaller organizations. So small organizations, we're talking about orgs that have 50 or less employees. We did notice a drop in call volume. So that might be an area of concern if you are leading a smaller recruiting firm, that the larger players are hitting the ground pretty hard. It might be something to look at as well. Armando?
Thank you, Adrian. And definitely, it's been exciting to start to see some recovery in the market. We don't just see it in the data, but also in conversations with customers and prospects. I'm definitely hearing a lot more exciting from firms now in Q1 of 2026, which has been great to see. But again, what it's interesting is that we started to see that potential recovery back in Q4 of 2025. One of the metrics was, as Noah mentioned, just looking at the average emails per week per recruiter. In Q4 of 2025, we finally came back to levels similar to very early of 2024, where again we had a hotter market. So again, that just showing some of the improvements and recovery that we expect and hope to see throughout 2026, and we're going to keep monitoring very closely. And then the last step or point, as Noah mentioned, interesting for firms to start to see their own data of some of these KPIs, not just as a way to monitor if recruiters are working and working hard, but also in combination with some of these benchmarks, being able to predict if specific industries, desks, teams are starting to see more demand. So then you can adjust your capacity accordingly and make sure that you're taking full advantage of the opportunities that are starting to show in the market.
Thank you, Armando and Adrian. And one point that I want to add here is that our ideas about a staffing recovery, that's just not solely based on the data coming from Prodoscore. If anybody here likes to follow, labor statistics from the BLS, you may know that about a month ago, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they recently put out, as a part of their monthly jobs report, revisions to all of their monthly jobs estimates over the course of 2025. Now, temporary help services was one of just a handful of industries that actually saw jobs numbers revised upwards over the last 3 months. So what that means is that from October to December of 2025, we actually saw our industry gain about 28,000 jobs. Now, in the grander scheme of things, those 28,000 jobs were a drop in the bucket. But 3 consecutive months of growth for the staffing industry, per the latest numbers from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, does suggest that a turnaround could very well be taking a hold of the staffing industry. And that is very much reflected as well from what Adrian was saying by this increase that we're seeing in calls and emails and overall activity, which is portending a ramp up in overall labor churn. However, unfortunately, we are seeing that productivity is flatlining right now. But that is contrasted by an uptick in engagement activity. So what does that all mean? Well, what it means is that recruiters are right now spending most of their time focusing on engagement, both with clients as well as talent. And the reason for this is, as I had mentioned earlier, this is all building up to a point in time in the labor market where there is going to be more churn. And so therefore, what we are seeing in the data is that not only recruiters, but staffing companies are quietly laying the framework for more orders and more activity that the labor market is going to see in the near term. Armando?
Yeah, thank you. And I think we can all agree that if recruiters are logging less manual tasks that maybe were impacting the levels of productivity and activity that we typically track, but they can do that in a little bit of less time and also with focus on higher value activities like engagement and call activity, that's always a plus. And to me, more than just the fact that call volume is up by 20%, I think an important metric that we're highlighting here is that the duration of these calls and these meetings is also up by 15%. So I think this is also a good sign of how AI and automation is starting to help recruiters free up and or have better screened candidates where they can spend more time now on the phone, making sure that they're vetting their candidates and preparing them for the interviews, which helps increase fill rates. So we feel like this is something really interesting that we want to continue to monitor this trend and see the impact that AI is having here. It's also interesting because many times we hear from maybe sometimes people within and outside of the industry concerns if AI is going to make the whole recruiting process less human. And again, we feel like this trend is showing kind of like the opposite. And again, we'll need to continue to monitor this trend. But right now, again, we're showing that AI can help, again, free up recruiters so that they can focus on these human-centric activities. And this is really where you can differentiate yourselves and your offering to your customers. And it's been interesting. We've been working with some customers. For example, we have a mid-sized staffing firm. They have about 200 recruiters in our platform. And we've been helping them do a lot of analysis out of their phone systems, Microsoft Teams, and some of the other tools that they use, where they're really focused on really understanding all of this call activity, understanding splits between internal and external meetings, but also understanding day of the week and time of the day where they're having higher engagement and better engagement with their candidates. So a lot of interesting analysis that you can do there with your call and meeting data to make sure that, again, your recruiters are taking advantage of efficiencies from AI and translating that into higher engagement with candidates. Anything else you would highlight, Adrian?
Yeah, I want to take one step back and then I'll highlight this key insight number two, just because a question came through around the 175 calls. So I want to add a bit of context to it. So we're talking about per week, and anytime when we're talking about calls, we're not necessarily talking about calls where no one picked up or if there was an answering machine. We're talking about connections. So we're talking when we count calls, it's the time in which a recruiter called either a candidate or a customer, and there was a connection that was made at that time. Specifically, though, for this slide, this is a very interesting one because the productivity score, we didn't see a change really at all. We're talking about literally 0.5, so effectively 0%. But this engagement is a very interesting statistic, specifically because what we're starting to see is this idea of time compression. What we noticed is when we're looking at the daily active time of people in 2024 versus 2026, what we've been seeing is the total active time has dropped about 21 minutes. And we believe that activity is coming from less job board usage. Essentially, what we noticed is that job boards, we saw a drop in about 10 minutes. But then when we start talking about AI utilization, we actually see a 9x increase. So what we think is happening here is recruiters are spending more time on AI tools. They're spending more times actually connecting with customers and connecting with candidates via calls. That's hence the 15% increase. But we're seeing that drop in job board utilization. In my mind, that's definitely an overall plus. The use of AI tools definitely makes a lot of the communication, at least the asynchronous communication, automatable. So that's very exciting to see that specifically in the data. Noah?
Thank you. Yeah, so much talk about artificial intelligence, we might as well just get to the third insight where we actually explain what the heck is going on with AI. And so, as both Adrian and Armando had mentioned, our data does show that there is a decline in job board usage, but an increase in the utilization of large language models as well as overall AI. And I think what this really reflects is that staffing companies and recruiters themselves, they're figuring out where AI can complement their overall workloads, and where recruiters as well as staffing companies specialize is that human connection. And so as long as they're continuing to get information on the back end in terms of job openings, in terms of hiring industries, things like that, then that gives recruiters as well as staffing companies more time to actually engage with people on the front end. And I think one other thing that I would like to point out a little bit earlier, where we saw that productivity within quarter 4 was essentially flat. Again, I think some context is helpful, particularly looking at the business cycle in staffing services. Now, everybody here is a good staffing company, so I don't think that you need to know this, but generally speaking, necessity breeds innovation. And so a lot of times when business conditions are a little tougher, when there's lower churn in the labor market, that's usually when a lot of staffing companies tend to focus on bolstering their productivity in order for them themselves to function at the most efficient rate, make the best utilization of their capital and labor inputs at a time of low churn as well as low sales. And so, furthermore, I think that this flatlining that we're seeing in productivity does somewhat portend a recovery within the staffing industry at large, because now staffing companies are thinking a little bit less about purely just trying to make themselves more efficient, and instead focusing on getting more orders and making sure that they're managing their clients in an effective way. And so then coming down to this third insight that we're seeing, I think that staffing companies and recruiters, they're going to continue to focus on where they can complement what AI can do well. I'm sure as staffing companies yourselves, you guys know that there's a lot of tools and vendors out there. And so therefore, I think what staffing companies are going to do to maximize their time is going to be to focus on that human interaction. Armando?
Yeah, thank you, Noah. And I think job boards will continue to be an important tech stack for firms, but definitely it's interesting to see how maybe the reliance and also how some of the top modern recruiters are using them is evolving. And obviously, one of the reasons why is AI, where probably no surprise here to see this big jump in AI tool usage, but it's always great to corroborate that with actual data. And I would say I'm actually surprised that it's not even a higher jump. I think there are firms that are still holding back a little bit, and this will continue to increase in the coming months. There's a lot of interesting things here to highlight. I know one of the questions that we got before the start of the webinar is what are we seeing recruiters and using, and how are they using AI? And there's definitely a lot of different variations of this. Definitely on the more sales side, we're seeing teams using tools like Seamless AI, which we're highlighting here, that can help automate a lot of the profiling and outreach from a sales perspective, that can help increase job orders. There's also some other tools. We started to see one in Q4 of 2025 called Salve.ai that will do a little bit more of the traditional recruiting workflow of helping you do sourcing, screening, and then scheduling for your recruiters. And then there's other solutions like Interview that will provide more analysis on your call scripts and meeting data to help automate how that information goes into the ATS, but also provide coaching tips. There's definitely a lot that we're seeing also from ATSs and their AI capabilities that are being leveraged today. That makes it a lot more efficient how the ATS database is being used, which I think is also impacting again a little bit of how job boards are being used. The last one, just also to that firms need to pay attention, is that tools like ChatGPT are still the number one type of platform that is being used, right? And so, is that a positive thing? Does that create some risk for you from a compliance perspective if it's not being used the right way? I think it's definitely something that firms and leaders have to get in front of to make sure that teams are leveraging AI tools the way that you want them and expect them to. And then the last quick thing, also, as some of this technology landscape is evolving, it's always a good opportunity to analyze your tech stack and identify ways that maybe you can optimize, where maybe you can reduce licenses in some tools that are not being used and use that budget for some of these newer tools and impact that you are expecting. Adrian?
Yeah, I agree with both of you said entirely. This is one of those interesting ones where the number of tools, you don't want to use too many tools, but you want to make sure that people have enough tools to do their job effectively, especially in the world of AI. So in my mind, I think the basic stack. You'll have an email client, you might have a phone system or dialer, so that's two. You'll have your ATS or CRM system. That'll be three. LinkedIn Recruiter, let's just say four. Um, on top of those integrations, you might actually want to look at different types of AI stacks that you can add on. So specifically, any type of scheduling automation. We've seen Calendly be used quite often. AI note takers, we see Otter and Fireflies show up quite often, along with video interviewing platforms such as HireVue, are those in which recruiters can definitely start using. What we do notice in particular, specifically with AI, what we're showing here, this 9x increase is across all users. We're talking about people who might be using AI for about a minute, all the way up to multiple hours a day. When we're looking strictly at a cohort of individuals who are using AI tools three or more times a week, this average use time jumps up to over an hour. So just keep that in mind as you're reading these statistics. Overall, there has been a massive increase in AI adoption, but there are certain cohorts that have adopted these tools quite regularly and pretty much take up about up to 40, if not more, percent of the activity that we see they perform on any given day. Specifically, agentic workflows are an area I would say that recruiters should look into. There are a lot of tools available now that make it as simple as a chat GPT interface to automate a lot of outreach that's done. So, in particular, you can have any type of outreach that you're doing to candidates. Let's just say if you want to summarize the candidate resumes, that can be done. Drafting outreach email sequences is another option, and also generating interview notes. I know for myself, I use the transcription and summarization almost on every single meeting that I have with my team, and that allows me to essentially keep track of what I'm doing. We'll talk more in the next insight about our high producers, essentially our exemplars. But what we do tend to see is that exemplars, they do have that basic stack. So once again, email client, phone system, ATS system, and some type of, well, just use LinkedIn Recruiter type of platform. But on top of that, they're actually utilizing AI as well. So their tech stacks tend to come out to being six or more tools, but we haven't really seen much success with individuals that are using more than nine tools in any given time period to get their job done. So I would say a good area to keep your tech stack is definitely between the six to nine if you want to be as effective as possible. Arma,
That's a really good point, Adrian. Oh, sorry.
no, no,
That's
no,
that's
you
a
go
really
ahead.
good that's a really good point. I was actually looking at a couple of surveys specific to the staffing industry about how staffing owners viewed the utilization of AI. What did they want to get out of their tech stack? And the number one objective, unsurprisingly, was getting more orders. But then, when staffing company owners were surveyed as to what results they were actually getting from AI, the results were a little bit more granular. They span things like being able to filter through resumes, being able to provide notes in interviews, things like that. And so, what that disparity between goals and outcomes suggests is that more tools is not always the best. And those who are the most productive, they have a set, they know what they're using their tools for, and they have very specific use cases for how that enhances their own responsibilities in their day-to-day functions. Great. Well, moving on to our fourth insight, as Adrian had mentioned, we also took a look at top performers. Now, in thinking a little bit about what exactly to say here, I was not very sure, but then it came to me. Our data really suggests that top recruiters are what you would consider to be ACEs. They're accessible to both their clients and candidates. They also are communicative and they're able to walk them through all steps of the recruitment process. And then finally, they are efficient, as both Adrian and Armando mentioned, in terms of what tools they're using and how they're using them. And so again, I think that really comes that really enunciates the point that what we're seeing from top recruiters is that they are focusing on that human element of their day-to-day responsibilities and then effectively integrating AI as well as other technology solutions on the back end so that way they have more time to do what they do well. Armando?
Yeah, this is an interesting one, no? And many times talking with customers at the beginning, maybe they highlight, well, I don't need to know what top performers do. They just execute and they get the placement, which is true. But what is interesting is then thinking and analyzing, well, what about the other group that is not hitting those KPIs consistently, right? What are they doing and how is that different from the top performers? Can we learn from them? And I think there's definitely a lot of insights that is very important that you can learn from your own top performers and the type of profile, but also type of execution that is needed within your firm, within your industry, to be successful. Um, no, I think you highlighted a couple very important ones. I think the other one that stood out for me is consistency. Something that has been really interesting is, again, most of the top performers are very, very consistent and very proactive in how they just plan their month, their weeks, and their days, and they execute like their level of activity, again, throughout the entire week is really consistent. And that, again, is different from the other group of BC players where sometimes, yes, the call volume might seem similar, but it's because they made a lot of calls on a Friday or on a Wednesday, kind of like to hit their goals and check the KPIs, but they're not executing the most efficient way, making sure that they're, for example, engaging candidates and doing that call activity the days and times that you know are the ideal connect rates with the type of candidate that you're reaching out to. So there's definitely a lot of interesting things here to analyze. And then we've worked with some other customers as well as they've looked into their top performers and have highlighted sometimes how simple things like just ATS CRM hygiene and making sure that they're logging notes and the number of notes that they're logging per week compared to the other group, but also just logging the notes right after the call so that the information is fresh and they have a good understanding of their accounts and their opportunities and candidates that they're working can make such a big difference. So a couple of those is what I would highlight that I've seen in the data and also from insights that customers have shared with us. Adrian?
Yeah, and to add on to it, I can dive a bit into at least some of the exemplar work that we've done. One thing I would tell you is that success shows up differently, but one thing that is common amongst almost every single exemplar is documentation. They all have a system where when, let's just say for one exemplar, we might see a high number of calls. When we're looking at the call to documentation CRM ratio, it tends to be close to a 1 to 1 or 1 to 0.8, meaning every single call that they make, they're actually documenting it. Similarly, with emails, sometimes we might see an exemplar who has very few calls. This is more so for the smaller orgs. We notice that there's a higher amount of emailing activity. Once again, high amount of emailing activity is always corresponds with a high amount of CRM activity in our exemplars. And it goes back to creating the infrastructure that allows you to be successful. That's a lot of what we do tend to see in our exemplars. I love the ACEs acronym that you just presented, Noah, because accessibility is something else that we see in our exemplars. And we talk a little bit about it there with the expanded availability. How I like to think of it is the available working hours are the times in which you're able to essentially meet with the customer, meet with the candidate. And in our lower performers, those times tend to be quite truncated. So right now we're saying that an exemplar might be working from say 7:30 to 11, making the workday about 12 hours. But keep in mind that that exemplar is not working the entire time. What they're actually doing is actually working their days out quite strategically, where let's just say if a candidate wanted to reach out to them before they went into work at say 7:45, this recruiter is going to be available. If they then want to reach back out to them, let's just say on their commute home after work at say 6:30 or so, this recruiter is going to also be available. So that's what we tend to see in our higher performers. It's really that accessibility and the ability to create systems of documentation of what you do. Noah?
Yeah, so finally, moving on to our fifth insight. We've talked a lot today about some commonalities in productivity by firms, about how recruiters follow the ACEs model, how there are certain commonalities with effective use of technology. But I think what's really important from this insight to understand is that there's no magic bullet when it comes to improving productivity. And actually, it varies quite a bit by the size of the staffing firm. What Prodoscore's data is showing is that larger companies tend to favor a more remote work environment, whereas mid-size and smaller companies tend to favor in-person operations. Additionally, what we see is that larger firms are taking advantage of more meetings, whereas mid-size and smaller companies, they are primarily doing more phone calls. And finally, one other thing that was really interesting about analyzing the data based on company size is that it seems that this recovery that we could be in will be filtering down from the larger companies to the smaller companies. And I think that part of it has to do with size itself. In this low churn labor market that we saw, your larger staffing companies that had established credibility, that had very deep pools of clients and talent benches, they were the ones that were able to do fairly well in terms of managing an environment of lower sales. But what we are seeing is that this recovery, if it does end up, being a wave that picks up all boats, we believe that that is going to turn over to mid-sized firms and smaller firms who do have more of that productivity imperative and who are going to be able to benefit from taking these process improvement steps now in anticipation of a more robust labor market later. Armando?
Yeah, thank you. No, and here, as Noah was highlighting, we also focus a lot on understanding by size of firm, how typically are recruiters working from a work location perspective and the impact that that can have on productivity. And it's been interesting because there's definitely certain trends that you can see based on the size of the firm, like Noah was highlighting. But there's also still a lot of variation, not only on the distribution of workplace, but also the actual productivity and output that you get from recruiters working in office and remote. So here important, I think, for firms to just do their own analysis and also analyze and track the activity of your in-office and remote teams to better understand what works best for you. In some cases, it might not be an option, and so then just make sure that again you're helping your recruiters be as successful as possible in the workplace conditions that you have. And many times, especially when working remotely, some might need more help from just time management skills perspective and also establishing the right work habits to make sure that they're successful. Adrian?
Yeah, it sounds like you guys really covered it. What I really want to hammer home is really its CRM discipline. What we are seeing in the larger organizations is something in which I would like to call more of a brute force approach to calls. It seems like they're trying to get market coverage just strictly through sheer volume of calls, where their all-time high of 157 a week on average is what we see in our larger orgs. The problem, though, is we're only seeing about 44 log CRM actions. So that's about a 3.6 to 1 ratio, meaning that there's probably a lot of dialing and hanging up or dialing and connecting, but not documenting the work that's being done. One of the major risks that that provides is when that recruiter leaves, who were they calling? What did they say? What part of the process are they at? Essentially, no one knows. And I see that as being one of the major risks for not having that type of CRM discipline. But for the most part, like what Armando was saying, same thing with Noah. We do see a lot of people, specifically in the larger orgs, they do tend to lean more remote. But at the same time, it's really ensuring that people have the right tools for the job, we believe is what leads to success here. Noah?
All right. Well, we have just gone through each of the major insights that you're going to find in this report. We also break down these insights by the size of the companies because what works for smaller companies might not necessarily work for your mid-size and larger firms. However, we're going to conclude now by just offering some high-level takeaways that we think can apply to staffing companies of any size and within any sector. I think the one that really resonates with me is the first one, reevaluating your productivity versus engagement balance. Adrian brought up a really good point that a sheer volume of calls does not necessarily translate to more orders. And I think that what we're seeing right now in the labor market at large is that employers are definitely being more cautious about who they bring on board because it costs more to add personnel. And so, therefore, the staffing companies that are really going to thrive are going to be the ones that know their niche and are effective at being able to convert candidates into workers. And that may not necessarily be, getting on the most number of phone calls, but being able to effectively market the right talent bench to those clients and being able to make those connections and more of them that clients find valuable and want to continue to have on their payrolls. Armando?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think a couple more to highlight here as part of a kind of like summary of what we've been discussing. Definitely number two, and looking at your remote hybrid teams. We were just talking about that. If you're a smaller firm, you might have them all in office, but at the end of the day, we know that people need today and want more hybrid options. And it's important to be able to give that flexibility. And I think with the right, again, technology, you can measure their levels of activity, performance, and give them the right help so that you can make sure that you're taking full advantage of hybrid models today without losing accountability. We talked also about importance of as things are evolving to conduct tech stack audits and make sure that you're adjusting your spend and optimizing the spend. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And we talked also at the beginning a little bit about how can you use your own data and benchmarks, and hopefully a report like this is helping you with this a little bit of understanding how you use your own data to forecast and again adjust capacity as needed. Adrian, anything you would add?
Yeah, two general ones and then one specifically for this report. Um, what we tend to see in the data, Fridays, please, please, please don't schedule any type of high volume outreach or campaigns or phone calls on Fridays. People are least productive there. It's just going against human nature. So I like to present that at the beginning of any recommendation because it's consistent across people, no matter what the industry is. Something else to look out for are the seasonal cliffs, specifically within recruiting. Notice that August and December tend to be 2 months in particular that we do see a dip. So keep in mind that the activities that you're doing 90 days before tend to impact essentially the actions you do today. You see the results 90 days in advance. So just keep that in mind with August and December. Might want to do maybe a little bit more planning in May to try to get ahead of that dip. But specifically from this report, I would say the two main ones are definitely value available working hours. The recruiters that make themselves available tend to be the ones in which are performing better. We see that across every single size of the org, and trust the leading indicator. Like I said, the activities you do today are very important for how your outcomes are going to show up about 90 days from today. So those would be my two main recommendations. No?
And maybe,
I'll just
sorry, no, just to clarify or highlight that by being available for a long window, we're not necessarily suggesting that recruiters are expected to be working, I don't know, 10 or 12 hours a day. But just again, plan your day and week accordingly so that if you know that maybe Tuesdays and Thursdays around 6 p.m. is an ideal time window to connect with candidates, well, maybe those days they can start their day later, right? And then switch it on other days. So again, just overall, you're making yourself available for the ideal times of the candidates and in managing your time efficiently.
I'll just conclude by saying that, take it from three guys that look at staffing and labor market data on a daily basis. Sometimes the most valuable data is in your own backyard. And so when it comes to thinking about how you are positioning yourselves for growth, I think where this report really shines is being able to give you a sense of where the industry is going. And so in being able to have benchmarks to be able to compare your own performance and gauge where you want where you see yourself 3 months, 6 months, a year from now. And so we all hope that these metrics will be useful to you in terms of being able to get a better understanding of your own performance and being able to think a little bit about where you want to be down the road in terms of growth. And so with that, I think that we can open up the floor for any questions.
Thank you so much for sharing that presentation with us, and we have quite a few questions already. Um, the first that we have is, do the employee numbers include the staff on billing, or is this internal staff? Oh, sorry,
Yeah,
that was answered in the chat. My apologies.
no problem. But yeah, I can
Um,
clarify quickly that yes, we're just looking at internal staff, not the consultants or a team on billing.
Thank you. There are so many new AI tool offerings. It's hard to know which ones to add to our arsenal and if our team is using them to the fullest extent. Is this anything Prodoscore can help us with?
Yeah, great question. And I think we kind of highlighted it in the presentation and that insight number three, as we saw the big jump in AI. We know there are so many different tools and options for AI today, and so one of the key things that we can help and are helping customers with is again to be able to analyze the usage of all of these different tools by your different groups of recruiters, by team, desk, or top performers, BC players, so that again you can start to see how the AI tools are being adopted. Are they being adopted as you expect them to? And also making sure that they will have the impact that you are looking to get out of them. The other piece, though, as well that I highlighted is also making sure of understanding what other AI tools that maybe you were not expecting are being used and how, so that again you can address that if needed, and make sure that that might not put you at risk of non-compliance or getting outcomes that you don't want.
Thank you, Armando. Our next question is, you've shown that calls and meetings are rising and are strong leading indicators. Have you analyzed the time lag between first outreach and booked meeting and how that impacts placement velocity?
Yeah, no, that's a really, really great question. So a lot of the data that we look at ends up being metadata. So that specific question would require us to do a few case studies with customers that we know are open to it, but we do not explicitly dive in as deep with our analyses for that question.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's a great question and something that we've started to hear more. So we will definitely start to evaluate how we could potentially bring some of those insights in future reports as well. Thank you for the
Yeah.
question.
This one is curious about distributions of the companies sampled, full desk versus split desk sales and recruiters.
Yeah, great question. We don't have that here, but it's definitely an important point and something that we will then make sure to incorporate in the next report. We'll provide a more detailed view of the sample that we used.
Thank you. Our next question is, did you mention that activity on Fridays decreases?
Yes. Yeah. Pretty much across the board. If there is a time in which people are checking out early, it tends to be on Fridays. And overall activity across the system, we tend to see much less engagement on Fridays, specifically starting in the afternoons.
Thank you. A follow-up question for me. Do you interpret that as being fatigue or more of a looking forward to the weekend kind of a thing?
It's a tough one because we see it consistently across almost every single company and industry that we look at. Um, yeah, no, that's a really good question.
I mean, I guess it's always
It could be
impossible to attribute
fatigue.
intent to data, but
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a very, very tough one. I think it's something that we should definitely do a follow-up study so we can get a generalizable answer to figure out why we are seeing that consistently. I see it in myself, I see it in my team as well. We see it at our organization, Prodoscore as well. We think it's just one of those people tend to start their weekends a little earlier.
And I think that the important part of that type of analysis, Monica and team, is plan for it, right? That is something natural. And sometimes teams will kind of like make the mistake of saying, oh, I'll get to it on Friday. But then by Friday afternoon, you might be exhausted. You need to shut it down. So make sure that, again, you're planning your Monday through Thursday to be very efficient because you know that naturally your teams on Friday will wind down a little bit.
thank you so much. That is about all the time we have for questions, but we've managed to get through all of them. Do you have any closing remarks for our audience today?
From Prodoscore perspective, just thanks everybody for watching and looking at the report. If there's additional questions that you may have or want one-on-one sessions, we're here available to help you. So feel free to reach out. And we're looking forward to continuing this with Noah and the team and coming back in a quarter or so and showing new trends and new things that we're seeing throughout the industry.
And on
No?
behalf of the ASA Research Department, we are very much looking forward to keeping the analysis going in future quarters. So definitely stay tuned for our updated report.
Thank you so much, Noah, Armando, and Adrian, for sharing your time and expertise with us today. And thank you again to Prodoscore for making today's webinar possible. If you've joined us for CE, the ASA and SHRM information is here on your screen. And as you exit Zoom today, you will be automatically directed to a survey. Please do take a moment and give us your feedback. We take all of your responses into consideration when planning future programming, as well as share them with our speakers. That's all for today. Thank you all so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.